Peace. Islam. Sheekamauga Alamassee-El. Coming at y'all live. Deep down. Alamassee, Arabian Country. Deep in the Arabian District. Coming at y'all live from the so-called town of Arabi, so-called Georgia. Arabi. So I'm saying, evidenced by the water tower behind me. Arabi, so-called Georgia. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to pass through because they said that this particular town, again, more death blows to the fake slave narrative. This particular town was first settled in 1888. So again, how are they running so many fake so-called black slaves on plantations, Negro slaves on plantations, if they just said it was first settled in 1888? That means the Confederacy had to fall before people could come this deep into the South for real. You know what I'm saying? But Arabi, Georgia, just wanted to, and they say, and interestingly enough, if you do the knowledge on Arabi, they say that the name Arabi was coined after a local surname. I mean, so who would have a name like Arabi as a surname? I mean, come on. And that's all it says. So again, they don't want to keep it a buck about the old Arabian culture of the South. The South was Arabia. It was Moorish. You know what I'm saying? It was Muslim. It is what it is. And that's really what we're trying to bring up in this drop, this particular drop. That's why we wanted to stop in Arabi, talk about the old Southern Arabian culture. And we've been kind of, just doing the knowledge on, just keeping it real, man. It's time to bring the real back. It's trying to bring real knowledge back, so you can orientate yourself with the proper demonstration. You know what I mean? With the proper disposition, so you can just move forward in an empowered state. You know what I mean? That's where we're going with it. So just wanted to do the knowledge. Now we've really been bringing it home that in the old so-called Confederate South, the reason why when you do the knowledge on the old Confederate South and a lot of the history that you're going to have on the old South is just always just going to talk about just slavery. That's all they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about Indian wars. They're going to talk about slavery. It was a slave-holding state. You know what I'm saying? They're bringing up this narrative about so-called being a slave-holding state because, again, there's different definitions of so-called slave and different reasons why they would call them slave-holding states from their perspective. One of the reasons was, again, in the South, you couldn't just, it was a noble hierarchy in the old South. It was Muslim and Yahudi. So you couldn't just move around freely in the South. So to a certain class of people who are they're very low level and they have a lot of criminality in their DNA and their culture, that's slavery to these people. Because again, the whole South was very conservative. I mean, you had to follow laws. You had certain places you just wasn't supposed to be. You had to earn. We had noble training. We had knighthood. We had all these types of things in the old South. So that's slavery to a lot of these lower level people who just like it in their lower self. They want to eat pork. They want to drink. They want to smoke. They want to party. They want to BS around. They want to sell off. They want to get masks and mass produce. This is just very low level stuff because these people don't want to work for anything. They're just lazy bums. You know what I'm saying? And it's slavery when you actually have to have a real Confederate meritocratic culture that you got to deal with. You know what I'm saying? So that's one reason why they'll call it slavery. Another reason why is because, again, this new so-called, again, not knocking Christendom. There's an old school Christendom and there's the new stuff. You know what I'm saying? Not knocking the old, it comes all the way back from the Old Testament Yahudi culture. You know what I'm saying? We're not knocking none of that. But there was a new version of it that was it was not allowed in the Confederate zones. You know what I'm saying? We wasn't really with all that because we very old school. This stuff is very, very new. You know what I mean? So they consider, because if you came around with a lot of that stuff, you would get bagged up because we were dealing with Barbary Muslim law. These people would get bagged up just like they would get bagged up in North Africa. They would get bagged up in certain places that was Muslim because we wasn't really with all that. You know what I'm saying? Like we dealing with the old Barbary Muslim customary law and all that new stuff where you can do whatever you want to do and be pagan and all that. They were more of a pagan culture. We just wasn't rocking with all that. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Not saying right or wrong. We just wasn't rocking with all that. The people got to face reality to what was really going on. So again, that's another reason why they're going to call it slavery. They just have to write it off as slavery because they don't know what was really going on. Because they wasn't allowed in the South. They wasn't allowed in these zones. So they're going to make up this fake slave narrative. It is what it is. But in reality, this was old Arabia. You know what I'm saying? This was the old Arabian. This was the Moorish Arabian land in the old deep South. so-called Florida, so-called Georgia, South Carolina, all that. You know what I'm saying? You would see mosques and old Yahudi temples all over this place. You know what I'm saying? Again, a lot of it, when that culture was shut down, they were converted into a lot of the churches. It is what it is. It's just facts. Not knocking nobody's culture. It's not hate speech or nothing. It's just facts. You know what I'm saying? We just got to start facing reality. You know what I mean? But I'm just gonna read how they talked about how the so-called Creeks dressed in the old South. And again, you can go and research a lot of the old so-called pictures of a lot of the again, the Mississippians, but they want to call them Negroes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? That fake old, that fake narrative. They want to call them Negroes. But just if you look at old pictures prior to like the 1870s or whatever, or the 1880s, you will see all of the sisters in the South with long dresses, with their heads covered, looking hella noble. But they're gonna call these people, they were former slaves. You know what I'm saying? Because again, and that's another thing, they call you a freed slave because they considered they were freeing you from your old conservative culture to come work for them in their new industrial culture. You know what I'm saying? You were free to be exploited. But it's interesting. And that's why it's always crazy. It's interesting that they're talking about you as a freed slave. You know what I'm saying? They freed you in a free society and all that, but you was still getting targeted and lynched and all that, all through the Jim Crow era and all of that. But you was a free slave. It never made no sense. Because if you were freeing somebody, they wouldn't have got treated so bad afterwards. Man, again, we done talked about it was doing a crusade and an industrial military campaign to take out all the old landowners, anybody who had allodial titles to anything all over the South. That's what the bad treatment was about. It was all economic. They needed you off of your land, out of your cities, off your towns, give up your titles so they could take it over and industrialize it. That's all it is, man. It really ain't that deep. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so just more evidence that this was Arabia. Let's just talk about how they say the Creek Indian, so-called Creeks dress, which is the Moors or the Moors. You know what I'm saying? Let's just see some of the clothes in this area. So this is old Moorish Barbary. This is the old so-called Creek land right here. Very recently, in the mid 1800s, became ceded over to the so-called United States. You know what I'm saying? And then again, if they just settle in this place in the late 1800s, I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying? They talking about they just settled this place. That means even after the land cessions, we were still running this area. We were still rocking down here in our Muslim culture. You know what I'm saying? So let's check this out. Okay, this is just excerpts from articles of how the so-called Creeks dressed. The Creeks, which is the Moors of the South. They dressed it says in the article I read, it said the Creeks wore skins, fabrics, leather shoes, breed cloths, silk tunics, and you already know a tunic is a long shirt to go like damn near down to your knees. Who else dresses like that? You know, they wore silk and fabric tunics. You know what I mean? They wore silk armbands, girdles, belts, turbans, cotton turbans and silk turbans with feathers. They rock facial tattoos and everything. So even to this day, you might see a so-called a dude from the hood nigga or something like that with the face tats and all that stuff. And this, like I said, this is just in a lot of people's DNA. That's why they call it thugged out. Because again, if you used to dress like a Muslim, you had that Muslim culture, you was a barbarian and a thug to these people. Because again, these people want to be able to do whatever they want to do. And in the old culture, we wasn't, you know what I'm saying? When you was in your demonstration, man, you would go upside somebody's head for coming down here trying to be all criminal and disrespectful and just and you know what I'm saying, a savage barbarian or something like that. But to them, you the savage because you enforce your laws and your customs and your culture. They just feel like they should be able to go anywhere and do whatever they want to do because they've been told that they got some type of special privilege or something like that due to the industrialists wanting to use them as foot soldiers and all that nonsense. You know what I'm saying? But one thing it did say about facial tattoos is that the so-called Creeks or the Moors used to tattoo their faces based on their achievements. So if you did something great, you showed valor in war or something like that, you would get tattoos based on that. You know what I'm saying? So again, a lot of that stuff is just, the difference is, like I've said in past drops, the difference in a lot of the culture, you see a lot of the people still doing, they call so-called hood or thug. It's in their DNA. But the difference is there's no spiritual guidance to what these people are doing, to what y'all are doing now. Back in those days, it was more spiritual and more based on valor and achievement. Like there was order to it. Because it had a spiritual, it kind of had a spiritual mechanism attached to it. These days, you're just doing stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because you're more, you know what I'm saying? You've all been put into an industrial culture, and there's nothing holy in that culture. So it is what it is, but the stuff still comes through your DNA. You know what I'm saying? So Okay, so we just talked about how the Creeks dress. I mean, that's hell of Arabian. They said they wearing silk tunics. You know what I'm saying? They wearing cotton and silk turbans and feathers. The women are wearing long skirts, and of course head coverings. I mean, and if you look at pictures of the old Southerners back in the day, of course they're gonna say they were slaves. You know, like you see a dark-skinned sister with a head wrap on in the old South, but she might be holding a so-called European baby or something like that. Again, these are orphan babies. You know what I'm saying? They were sending these orphans all over the dang on place, and they wanted to explain that in the Reconstruction era when they rewrite history. They don't want to admit that the old civilization was here. They're gonna talk about that there was a slave woman with a dang on master's baby. Man, get out of here, man. And then it's crazy because you would have had a sister with her hair wrap and she looking hella well put together, dressed and noble, but they gonna, like, you know, since she had on nice little garbs and silk veils on her and nice little head wraps and all that, and then they're gonna talk about she a slave woman. Man, she's holding a European orphan, man. You know what I'm saying? They sent these orphans everywhere, and they even got movies. You can watch the new Netflix movie called Montford's Ranch, where they talk about it was a so-called Sheekamauga. God damn, this how you know you in the South, man. With these bugs, man. Man, they come at you too. They aggressive. But anyway, they got this movie on Netflix called Montford's Ranch, and they got this so-called Chickasaw man. Of course, he's light-skinned. You know, they're gonna give you that Hollywood mess. But even he had a ranch, and it was towards the end of the Confederacy and all of that. But this man had a ranch out in, like, it was out west somewhere, and then they had some random European come up with a bunch of European orphans, and they gave it to this Chickasaw man who had a big old ranch. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what was going on back then. You know what I'm saying? So then they get pictures of these people who had these orphans in their households. They're gonna call them some slave woman with some slave master's child. Man, get out of here with that nonsense. Since when did a slave dress that noble? Man, get out of here, man. Y'all just, boy, man, I tell you what. But anyway, so that's a demonstration of how the Creeks dress. Again, we're talking about silks, fabrics, leather shoes, silk turbans and sashes and cotton. You know what I mean? Like, these people were dressed like nobles because they was nobles. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't come around here if you wasn't well put together like that. So anyway, so we're gonna talk about the Tsalagi, which is so-called Cherokee. And see, that's one thing we want to get out of the way. Again, this culture was Moorish. The Moorish nation is what used to control this land. You know what I'm saying? In the interior of the country. So all of these, and there's nothing, we're not knocking if you're dealing with the federally recognized demonstration. But the so-called Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Muskogee, and all of that, the federally recognized, that's not you know what I'm saying? There was a whole different faction that they just wrote out of history. You know what I'm saying? So the old Muslim, the Moorish, you know what I'm saying? And you look at pictures of Noble Drew Ali, you see how he dressed. He was dressing like that's how the so-called Cherokee or Tsalagi used to dress, but they were called Tsalagi, not Cherokee. Cherokee is that new Reconstruction word. You know what I'm saying? Because that was when the only group that can maintain the old demonstration legally, and it can't be infiltrated legally, you know what I'm saying, is the Moorish demonstration. And that's when Noble Drew Ali consolidated. But Cherokee and all of that, that's when a lot of other people who had nothing to do with the old Moorish Muslim culture was able to claim like they was some type of blood. And then they were able to rewrite the culture with them little war bonnet feathers in their head and all that, instead of turbans and all that, with that fake Plains Indian demonstration talking about that's a Cherokee. Real Cherokee is a Muslim. That's the Tsalagi. You know what I'm saying? Tsalagi. When the last time you seen one of these $5 federally recognized Cherokee call himself a Tsalagi? You know what I'm saying? Like, get out of here with that nonsense. So let's talk about how the Tsalagi, which was the Muslims, they just wrote that out of history. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't want to admit that they was Moors. Or the Sheekamauga. That's the real Tsalagi, Sheekamauga. Not no dang on. I mean, it is what it is. No knocking to the so-called Cherokees. You know what I'm saying? But that is a federal new term. The old term was hella different. It was Muslim. You know what I'm saying? So let's talk about how the Tsalagi dressed. You know what I mean? They said they were of course, if you read a lot of these articles, it's going to talk about how, like, the way they were dressing all noble and upright and all of that was because they met the Europeans. Man, get out of here with that, man. Muslim culture is old American culture. So nobody met no European and started wearing no turban. That don't even sound right, man. These people are just insane. But anyway, let's talk about how the Tsalagi dressed. They talk about how they wore braided jackets, breedcloths. The women wore long, full skirts, feathered turbans. You know what I'm saying? They wore deerskin coats. They wore sashes, like silk sashes. You know what I mean? It said they wore silk turbans. The women wore veils and head wraps. This is all from articles I got from studying the old Tasalagi dress code, the so-called Cherokee dress code. It was all Muslim. That's why, I mean, not Muslim, but Muslim. Again, that's why the South is Arabia. It's Barbary. You know what I'm saying? So that's the Tasalagi. And again, everybody knows that Noble Drew Ali, despite all the people trying to discredit that man, was born on a so-called Cherokee, so-called reservation. So when you see how Noble Drew Ali is dressed in all of his pictures, that's exactly how the Tasalagi were dressing back in the day. They were noble Muslims. You know what I'm saying? So think about one of these backwards looking type of people walking around here now, old inbred type of people trying to walk up to a noble Muslim. You know what I'm saying? They just couldn't do it. They would just through Mother Nature, they would be in a subservient position. You know what I'm saying? So they had to take orders from the noble Muslims and these type of people in the South. You know what I'm saying? Who was running the South. That's why they was talking about it was slavery. Because they knew they was going to go down South and run to some noble Muslim, and they was going to have to take orders, and they were going to be subordinates. That's just what it was. You know what I'm saying? It's noble. You see like a picture of Noble Drew Ali, who was a real Tasalagi. You know what I'm saying? By blood, he's a Tasalagi, or so-called Cherokee, or so-called Tasalagi. You walk up to a noble like that, looking with your suit and tie and your jeans and your t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? These people have always worn variables of them type of clothes. And you walk up to a noble like that, you don't think you're finna be in a subordinate position. That's why it was so-called, it's talking about some slavery in the South. Man, get out of here with that. You know what I'm saying? This is the Arabian culture. Now, we're gonna quickly do the knowledge to type of stuff that was, we've been talking about this, but the type of stuff that was going on after the war, after 1865, when they were just going hard, like they were like, nah, we gotta shut this Muslim and Yahudi culture down. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise we're not gonna have a chance at industrialization. Because these people fight too much, they're too noble, they don't listen, they won't take orders, they won't do anything. So we gotta go hard to try to re-educate. We done killed it again. After the war, they had killed enough of the real men off. The real knights, the real defenders. Enough people have been killed, and enough of the old military hierarchy and organization they used to defend these places was gone. It was able to be dismantled. It was still plenty of militias around, but they just didn't have that larger they didn't have that larger type of organization anymore to defend the land. So in that situation, that leaves a lot of people unprotected, a lot of families unprotected. So they had to kind of be subjugated to these new weak men, weak people coming in with this re-education mess. You know what I'm saying? So people, again, the old South was Muslim. When they say you are all these so-called African-American, so-called free slaves, they were freeing you from your old culture. Now let's do the knowledge too. There was a place called, and this is just, evidence. It's just one symptomatic event that was going on all over the so-called old South. You know what I'm saying? That Reconstruction era South. We just gonna talk about it, but okay. So they had they had a place called Tolson's Chapel in Sharpsburg, Maryland. This is just one story out of probably a million that was going on in the South. So we're gonna talk about. I did some research on this place, Tolson's Chapel. It was a church and school that was constructed in 1866, right after the war, by some African American so-called Methodists in Sharpsburg, Maryland, right after the war. So we're just gonna do the knowledge on what they were doing up there. You know what I'm saying? Let me see. Check it out. So y'all can do the knowledge of Tolson's Chapel. I'm gonna put it in the description. Tolson's Chapel. This is just one event out of a million. You know what I'm saying? One example out of a million of what was really going on in Reconstruction era, how they were re-educating our people and turning them into these new people, turning them into what you see walking around right now. You know what I'm saying? So in Tolson's Chapel, they said some African American Methodists. Again, we already did the knowledge to the African American Methodist demonstration comes from the Northeast. It doesn't come from the South. So it only got South after 1865. So we said the African Americans built Tolson's Chapel in 1866 as a church and a school. Okay, now it said in this story, it said the so-called African Americans. This is just an excerpt that they said. So-called African Americans' lives as free people in a free society, Reconstruction, learning to read was a symbol of freedom to the so-called African Americans. You know what I'm saying? Okay, now let's do the knowledge to that little statement right there. Now, basically what they're saying is, they were coming up with this new, now it wasn't even called African Americans back then. I think it was just called Negroes or Coloreds or whatever. But they're basically saying that these people these people used to be Muslims. They used to be Yahudi. They used to have an old culture they were a part of before the war in these areas. Because again, in the South, all these towns are still majority Mississippian. These are still our towns. We still here. You know what I'm saying? So they're saying that the so-called African Americans, that this new demonstration, this new thing that they're putting together, these people are free people now, because again, they have been freed from their old conservative noble culture in the eyes of the newcomers. Now you're free to be with us and work for us and help us industrialize. So they were saying that in a free society, again, this is just cap. This is not a free society. You're free to be a wage worker. You don't have any noble titles or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So in a free society, and then another thing that's free is just degenerate type of culture is able to manifest, you know what I'm saying, in certain places that wasn't being able to manifest before. But they're saying in a free society, learning to read was a symbol of freedom. Now let's do the knowledge to that right quick. The old language in most of America, and many people have already broke this down. Again, people have always spoken versions of English. You know what I'm saying? That's been around longer than people, but they spoke the old English. But in America, people spoke Latin, the real Latin. People spoke High German. People spoke High Arab, you know what I'm saying, the old Mozarabic, you know what I'm saying, all type of, it'll say the Creek Muskogean language. More than likely that was like Mozarabic, or it was it was a High Latin type of language. You know what I'm saying? But again, 1865, they put the country under military. They put the country under like basically martial law. So a lot of that stuff was outlawed. You know what I'm saying? And that's still standing to this day. So they got rid of they outlawed a lot of those languages. You know what I'm saying? And anybody that was still speaking them, they would kill you. You know what I'm saying? Like it was because it was under martial law. We've already went through all this mess. A lot of these other they talking about the end of the world, and we talking about, we're gonna be put under martial law and it's gonna be war. Man, America has already been through that. Best believe. The rest of the world is just going through all of that. You know what I'm saying? They had to break the big dog first before they could bring that garbage everywhere else, because the Moorish nation protected everything real in the old world. You know what I'm saying? So check it out. So when they say they were learning to read and write, all they're saying is you're learning to read and write in this new version of English that we pushing forward. We can rewrite history in your culture. You know what I'm saying? So any of your old language, you better not ever get caught speaking that. And these people was already literate. They already had a dang on culture. You know what I'm saying? They already had language and all that. Their language was more advanced than these people could ever dream of. But it had to be watered down to the gringo stuff that people could even understand. But they telling you learn how to read and write in their language. So that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, Marxist, communist culture. Even back then, that's what it was. You know what I'm saying? So now, they said they had a small number of so-called literate African Americans in that area of Maryland back then. Man, all they saying is, again, these people had we had their own Muslim schools, their own institutions. They were teaching their own language. You know what I'm saying? They had their own thing. But when all this got shut down, these new people who are slow, and people who are all slow, but they were told that they were superior or something like that, they're talking about, whatever y'all had was primitive and you know what I'm saying, animalistic, so y'all learning this new watered down version of English. Now you learning how to read and write. Man, get out of here with that nonsense. But anyway, so they built that chapel up in Maryland, 1866. You can do the research on it, and it goes through how they were running so many they were running so many Moors into young Moorish children into these schools to be re-educated into the new Reconstruction version of history and all that. And they were telling them they were free slaves, because again, a lot of the men were killed off. These people were under martial law, so they could only go so far. So when you put in these re-education camps, they're gonna tell you what it is, and you're probably gonna believe it. I mean, what other option do you have? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you gonna think you was a free slave from Africa or whatever you was. You know what I'm saying? So they did mention, interestingly enough, they talk about the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Abandoned lands, right? You know what I'm saying? The Freedmen's Bureau worked with northern benevolent organizations such as the American Missionary Society and the American Freedmen's Union. Now again, why would they need a missionary society for the South to send down south? We already know that missions and missionaries are there to spread a new religion or a new culture to an indigenous group of people or whatever. Or just the missionaries. I mean, missionaries have always been around, but even before all the current stuff we're dealing with. But why would they need missionary society into the South? because they converting them from Islam, old school Yahudi culture, into this new stuff, into this new, this mess they got going on now. This not indigenous to America. You know what I'm saying? Not right or wrong, but it just is what it is. Okay, so now, they also talked about, and this is the Tolson's temple, they sent a white man, so-called white man, named Ezra Johnson to Sharpsburg to help teach the newly freed so-called African Americans. You know what I'm saying? And they sent a man named John Carter down there in 1869, and he was funded by the Presbyterian Home Mission. You know what I'm saying? So they sending these northern Yankee fools down, you know what I'm saying, in large numbers down to the South after the war to so-called re-educate and educate the so-called African Americans or the blacks. You know what I'm saying? Which is the old Muslims of the South. You know what I'm saying? Again, a lot of the stuff, the crazy stuff they see going on now, it's not indigenous to the South or the Midwest. It comes from the Northeast. It comes from Yankees and foreigners and all of that. And they sent these fake missionaries all in the South after 1865, and we've been messed up ever since. And again, I think it's interesting that they talking about you was a free man and a free slave in a free society, but they still was targeting you and murdering your people all through just indefinitely, really, to this day. You know what I'm saying? So you free, but you getting targeted and murdered left and right, and you can't, and you have very little. You're able to defend yourself best you can, but you have very little defense. So again, you're denationalized. You're cut off from international ties. You're cut off for help. And you're just kind of a sitting duck out here, and they re-educated you into a good old Negro. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. Again, not dealing with color, but it is what it is. But just again, that's why. You don't see sisters rocking the head wraps or the long dresses. You don't see the turbans. You don't see any of that stuff no more because it was outlawed after 1865. They sending the missionaries down and re-educating you and telling you, you can't dress like that and speak your high language, your high noble language, and your high noble dress code no more. You better dress like a good Negro with your suit and your tie. You can't wear your chains. You can't have your tattoos. You can't do none of that stuff no more. You better not wear no bandana. You better not wear no color nice turban. You can't put no feathers in you can't do none of that no more. You know what I'm saying? You can't be regal and be taking all our women and all that stuff no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, get out of here, man. So anyway, tapping in from Arabi. Again, why would a town be called Arabi? This is old Arabian country, man. Get out of here with the nonsense. But that's peace. Tapping in with y'all deep in Arabia. I'll tap back in.